You're listening to Unfiltered, real talk about sex and love with Ashley
and Heather. And today we're going to be talking about trading addictions, which is one of the things that comes up a lot in our conversations with people, and especially when we start talking about the 3 to 5 year process that it takes for healing and recovery. So just jumping into our first question, it asks, if people struggle with addictions, why can't they just quit cold turkey? And this is one of the fascinating things about addictive behavior. And a lot of times we can see what's happening. Like if somebody's using a substance, it becomes super evident in their behavior. But a lot of times when it comes to sexual addiction or process addictions, their behavior is a little bit more covert and kind of hidden away. And so sometimes it can be harder to even identify what's happening with them. But when it comes to really all of our addictive behaviors, it's based on something that's happening in the brain. It's based on when we do something that's going to artificially and stimulate the production of dopamine in our brain, our feel-good chemical. It's part of our reward system in our brain. And so it really does come from this physiological process that's happening in our brain. And a lot of times when you have somebody who struggles with addictive behavior, their brain patterns, like for the rest of us, we would be really even and really just kind of in this little bit of an up and down line on like our baseline close to normal. It just barely goes up and down. Somebody who struggles with addictive behavior, they're used to having the way they process their world is so amped up. They end up finding excitement in all these different areas. And so they don't even function well at baseline. They have created in their brain this way that they're just going from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing because their brain has become so conditioned to need this extra amount of dopamine all the time. And so this is one of the things that we notice a lot with people is that when they have trained their brain not only to seek excitement, but when that excitement kind of loses its flair, they're going to do something else, something more risky, something more challenging, something that's going to take them to a higher level in their experience and what's happening in their brain, which really is all about tolerance and how we kind of train our brain to increase what is exciting to us. And so what's interesting with this is that because we want people to get really the way they process their world down to that baseline again, that feels really super uncomfortable to people who have, jumped from one addiction to another their whole entire life. And it really is trying to get them to, kind of quit everything, which is another problem in and of itself, but to quit everything that's going to bring their baseline back down to normal, but they're going to feel really gross and icky and depressed and have anxiety over it. But a lot of times, if they'll stay in that place for 60 to 90 days, it's almost like they're able to reset their brain so that then they can do something new. But the idea of just quitting cold turkey, well, God can do anything. He can do what he wants to do with anybody. It normally doesn't happen that way. And it takes really kind of weaning ourselves off of the behaviors that we are addicted to and replacing it with something else.
Yeah, I was thinking too, just my own history, of struggling lifetime of having an addictive personality. It does feel depressing being at that baseline if you're functioning with all these things that are giving you extra stimulation. And what you were saying about it can take time to bring the brain back, and God can do it, because that's something we hear is like, we have a God that delivers, right? But we also, all of our things that we do have an impact on our body because God made the body. And so it's not science or scripture, it's both. And what we do impacts our body, and it could impact our spirituality. And it kind of made me think of like, if somebody's been an overeater, and let's say they're very overweight and they have all like heart disease and diabetes, maybe God delivers them from struggling with food, but there's still these ramifications that take time to reset and to where it maybe doesn't feel like it's as much of a struggle anymore. Sometimes I use these analogies. You're like, no, that one doesn't fit with this brain thing. But that's what I was thinking is it's kind of like maybe even God could take away desires sometimes, but it's still going to take time to retrain and rewire our brain if we've been in this pattern for a long time. And what we want is for somebody to not just stop and then white knuckle it and be angry. We want them to truly renew what they had done and replace it with good things so that they can live a life of joy. Because when John and I were first working on our recovery, it's like, is this how I have to feel? Is this how I have to just white knuckle it? It's like, I don't want to just not do things because it's on the Christian nice list of I don't do these things, but inside I'm miserable.
Right.
I want to really get in there and do the work and rewire so that, as Rodney Wright will say, my old pastor, my want to changes, that I don't want to do those things anymore because I've replaced them with other things that I want to do that are better for me and my family. And I like the trading addiction things. I've described it before. It's when I was in that, it felt like a whack-a-mole game. And we use one of these stories in our newest resource, Authentically You, where we say, okay, maybe you're sitting at home and you're looking on social media and you see something that's triggering and hurtful. And so you just start scrolling away, and then soon that leads to sexual arousal because you get on another page and maybe you act out and relapse with porn and masturbation. So the next day you're like, okay, no more social media. I'm going to do no social media for 2 weeks. But then you get home, you're pacing around the house because you want to pick up your phone, but you said you're not going to. So then you go to the cabinet and you start eating. And then you say, I shouldn't have eaten all that. Now I'm going to be fat. Now look at what I did and I shouldn't have done that. And so then maybe that leads to an eating disorder. And that was some of my pattern when I was living on my own. It was like, okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to stay off social media because that's not good for me. I'm not going to go out dancing at the bars because that's not good. So then I'm bored and I'm feeling like I don't want to be at this baseline or, not have that stimulation. So then I'm eating and then I feel bad about that. So then I'm engaging in my eating disorder. So then I feel bad about that. And then the whole shame cycle starts over. And it would have been good for me to just be like, okay, let's start with one thing at a time. What's the most destructive thing that you need to focus on? And what can we replace it with that's healthy and be intentional? Because it does feel like if you're a Christian, cold turkey should just work. Like you should just cast that sin out and run as far away from it as possible and pray the armor of God over you and you should be okay. And it almost feels like cheating if you're swapping. You're like, no, I don't want to be an addict to anything. And it's like, well, you're not going to be an addict to a new thing, but your brain is going to need to do something with that space.
Right.
And it's going to need something to go there. And so let's be intentional about what we put there rather than just leaving it up to free will or whatever candy bar comes your way.
Right, exactly. Well, and one of the things that we hear a lot is to, pray more, read your Bible more, which are important things. And they're important as far as our, spiritual walk and our growth and how we change. But sometimes it takes doing that and doing practical steps at the same time to really move in your healing.
Yeah, when I was struggling with my thought process, when John and I were, John would be away on a fire assignment for a few weeks, and I knew I could really spiral with betrayal thoughts. And so I would intentionally for, a season of years, find a project on Pinterest. So I ended up building this really long, 8-foot long table, and I built it from scratch and I stained it. And that was my project. And every hour I had free from the kids, I put my podcast in and I built that table, and it just felt so good to be doing something with my hands. And then I was able to redecorate my living room and put this table up, and that was good. So then the next time he went on a trip, I was like, what am I going to do? I built a little bench and just finding something that I could look forward to at the end of the day versus just having this free time, because our grandma said that idle hands are the devil's workshop. Right? Is that what it is?
I think it is.
Okay, my grandma never said that, but I heard other people's grandmas say that. Idle hands is the devil's playground, right? And so be intentional about filling that time, especially when you're early in your either recovery or if you're dealing with betrayal, that we're not just having this idle time to let the wind kind of take us wherever. Okay, the next question that I have is, how long will it take to fully recover from addictive behaviors? And this is a tricky one because I think if we tell people once an addict, always an addict. You always need to start every sentence with, I'm an addict, or you always need to identify as an addict. That could feel hopeless. But then at the same time, it's naive to say, once I'm free of those, I don't have to worry about it. And so I think for me, I like to have a balance. And of course, we say that recovery is a 3 to 5 year process. And I truly believe that because that's what I've seen time and again, not only in my own marriage, but with couples we help, that when they're intentional about the process and they do that 3 to 5 year process, that's kind of the place we see them not having to think about it daily, that it's not this thing that's all consuming and it's every hour of their day. But now it's something of, I need to be aware of that. I need to be aware that that's a vulnerability for me, that kind of music, that kind of environment. And so it's there, and I avoid those things, and I probably have boundaries in those things. But I think at that 3 to 5 year mark, when we've done the work, then our want to changes, and we don't even want to go to that place that brought us, destruction and brought our family destruction. And so that's kind of the difference. But you do want to go through your life understanding that's a vulnerability. So for an example, for me, like I said in one of our earlier podcasts, when I was single before I met John, I had my twins, and the twins were 5 when I married John. And so between the ages of 1 and 5, I was a single mom, and I would be in church all the time because I wanted my kids in church. I had never dealt with any of my issues, the rape, the abandonment issues, the racism growing up, that all was just shoved in there. And so I didn't really know how to be in a relationship in a healthy way. And so I would basically white knuckle it all year and pendulum swinging into the acting in. And then about once a year, I'd end up like going out because it was a friend's birthday or something, and I wasn't self-aware. So then I'd find myself in a situation where I ended up having a one-night stand or crossing lines sexually. And then I'd feel all this shame and try to hold it all in again and white knuckle it again for the rest of the year. And what I needed to know was, at what point do I have really good decision-making control? And then that's where I shift things. And so when I ended up meeting John and we were dating, and he said to me, "This isn't what I'm looking for." He walked out on me on my 24th birthday, and I was like, "No, like, I just want a husband. I'll do anything because I'm a love addict. What do you need? Give me a list." And so, but he was like, I'm ready to settle down. And so I said, "Okay, well, I'm not going out dancing anymore because that's a vulnerability for me." And so for 10 years into our marriage, I didn't ever go out dancing. And then it was one of my Bible studies, friend's birthday, and they wanted to go out to the piano bar, which is not like a clubby club, but it's like a bar with music. And it's like, okay, I need to talk to John about this. And so I talked with him, and he's like, "Yes, you need to go." And then we were able to like talk it out and say, where are my weaknesses, and where would I need to call it a night, and what kind of communication do I need to have with him? And I was able to go, and there was no triggers, no boundaries crossed, no nothing. But I went in fully knowing and fully aware that this is a sore spot from my past, and I need to be wise about how I enter into this and have my own car so I can go home when I want to, and things like that.
Yeah. And it's one of the things too that, and I've heard the same thing, especially in recovery groups, is that you have some people who they might find, significant healing in that 3 to 5 years into their recovery, but they're also the same people who say, "I will be in a group the rest of my life," just because they know that having that support and that accountability, and even just having those other relationships with people who are also in recovery, that is a huge part of what's keeping them sober. And so it's really an important piece of it, but also that when we're intentional about replacing those unhealthy behaviors with something that's going to benefit us in the long run, those are going to be the things that help us to renew our mind. And that really is what Scripture is saying, is that we don't have to stay in this place that is hurting us or where we're hurting other people, but we can choose to go through the process and stick with it, even if it does mean that we're going to be doing something that's going to be working toward recovery or working toward healing for the rest of our lives. But we're doing it because we need it to change our brain.
Right.
We need it to renew our mind. And so it just really is a significant part of the process, and really something that we want people to be focused on the work, not on how much time it's taking.
Right.
Because if you focus on the time, then it feels daunting. But if you're just saying that, okay, I'm going to take one day at a time, one step at a time, and I'm going to do the work, and I'm going to see where I am at in a year.
Right. And if you think about it in a way of, biblically, we're promised temptation and struggles. We're going to be pulled to the right and the left. And so it's really about staying intentional and keeping our focus on the path we should be on, our focus on God, and our focus on health, and thinking of it as a life of always having accountability and support people that can help us when we're going off course and just course correct all the time. And it's like, I'll be like, I'm done with group. I'm so tired of doing homework. And then about 6 months goes by and I'm like, I should probably lead another group, just to be aware, because you get lazy, you get in your rhythm, and you realize you almost start to miss it. Like, I'm realizing I like that weekly check-in of just saying, where am I at? What do I need this week? And that could look different for each person, but it is it's going to be a lifelong thing to need to be aware of what pulls you away from health. That's just human nature,
right?
And so that's going to be part of the process. Okay, so one of the tools that we have is called the 3 circles. So we have a question here: how can the 3 circles tool help? And this is probably one of my favorite tools because it's so simple. And so if you think of it, and we'll put it in the show notes as 3 circles, your inner circle is going to be my place where I never want to return, and probably the place that's causing the most destruction. Like you said, Heather, we don't want to try to do everything at one time. But for example, if you're having affairs, sleeping with prostitutes, looking at pornography, and it's causing destruction in your life or your marriage, those are probably the places you're going to start. And then your middle circle are going to be the things that can lead you there. So for me, going out to bars or going to dance clubs were the precursor. It wasn't that I was dancing that was sinful or hurtful. It was that it ended up leading to flirting or going home with somebody. And so I needed to make sure that was in the middle circle. And then in the outside circle, it's hiking, it's building something. Like I had said, those are healthy things where I walk away from those feeling refilled, and in no way it's pointing me toward relapse. So if you think of the middle circle are things that could possibly lead you to relapse: staying up late and watching TV, taking your phone to the bathroom, having unstructured time, drinking could be one. Delaying work projects because then you're stressed and then you're looking at a way to numb out. So put the things that could possibly lead you toward relapse. And the beauty of that is 6 months or 9 months down the road, you can look at that. And so now if you take mine and my husband's inner 3 circles, you'll see that thank the Lord, one night stands, prostitutes, pornography are not on the inner circle. It's more, they're still there. Like I said, we need to make sure that we always keep aware that those are vulnerabilities. But what's going to be in the middle circle is I'm struggling with anger. I'm struggling with binge eating. And then you kind of can bring new things in, and it's that onion layer effect of, okay, now we're going to work on this. And for some people, depending on where you're at, that can feel overwhelming. Like, am I always going to have problems? So now I have to work on my anger. But for other, it's like, it was so good and so freeing to see where God took me out of this addiction. I'm excited to see what growth and what possibilities are going to happen when we work on this part of my life now.
Right. And that's one of the things too with a lot of times in recovery programs, you hear a lot of don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and we tend to focus on what we're not supposed to be doing. Whereas with the 3 circles tool, you have that outer circle, which is all about health and self-care and all of the things that really are the things I get to do. But then if you notice on the outer circle, it is bigger than all of the other circles. And that is the area where we want to put things like self-care and the things that are good for us and healthy for us and the things we enjoy. And really, I think that the 3 circles helps us to focus on the yes part of what we're learning about health and healing and the things that we can do and not be so focused on the things we're not supposed to be doing.
So let me ask you a question. Are Oreo cookies in your outer circle or your middle circle?
Wow. Oreos are in my outer circle. But they would have been in my middle circle for a while, but because I have gained so much health around my Oreos, and I know that I can eat 3 Oreos because that is a serving, and I don't have to eat the entire package, that they can still be something that I enjoy, and they're on my outer circle now.
And that's such a good point, because going to the gym would have been on the middle circle for John at one point. And then as we both got to the place where we reestablished trust and boundaries and communication and health, now going to the gym is the outer circle. And so some of those middle circles can be outer or middle, depending on where you're at and how you're using them.
Yep, exactly. It's all about growth and healing.
And that's why we need outside people, though, to help us.
Yes, so that they can ask you questions about Oreos. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining us for this conversation. If you can think about it, we should be talking about it. So send us your questions at unfiltered@puredesire.org. And if this episode was helpful for you, subscribe and share it with your friends.